77 Law Grace. Before we get...
Now stop that.
Hello, Adrian. Thanks very much for waiting, sir. How you doing?
Excellent, Todd. How are you?
Okay, you crack me up. You are an atheist who listens to this program.
I do, and I can totally understand your frustration, Todd.
I'm not frustrated. Sad.
No, frustration with the fact that not even the worshipers of Christ can agree on how to worship Him. I can understand how that can be frustrating.
Oh, dude, you just snuck one in right off the bow there. Hey, wait a second. Here, wait a second.
Yeah.
I got a question for you. You are studying marine biology, correct?
Essentially, yeah, fisheries. I'm studying the fisheries in Hawaii.
Does everybody who is in your field agree as to how many fish should be caught and how the marine environment should be run? Is there complete agreement there?
There isn't, but that's only because there isn't a full understanding of the marine environment.
Okay, well, that's worse.
We know how many fish.
I was shooting back at you, and I was going to say, because if there isn't complete agreement, therefore fish don't exist. But you actually were worse in the thing with there's no agreement in the deal. Now, okay, why are you
Give me a point to start with, and then we could go over here.
Why do you not believe that Jesus is your God?
I do not believe that Jesus is my God because I do not accept that the evidence put forth is substantiated or corroborated, and not only the supernatural claims made by the Bible, because it makes a lot of natural claims, and so if not all of the natural claims can be supported by evidence and studies and people who look into these things, then I have very little reason to believe the supernatural claims, because the supernatural claims require, even more evidence.
Okay.
But I would settle for evidence of the natural claims.
Adrian, do you believe that Julius Caesar was mortally wounded on the Senate steps by Brutus and the gang?
I can accept that as true. And because it's corroborated, and just like I've heard that argument where why do I believe George Washington existed and stuff like that.
Let's stay away from Washington and just with Caesar for a moment. The activities of Jesus are far more corroborated than those of Julius Caesar.
Right, and that's fine, but then you leap to saying that. Well, hold on, I'll get to that. But you also leap to then. He was born of a virgin and then resurrected from the dead, appeared before his homies, and then ascended into heaven.
Yes.
And so even if I believe, because I can accept that a man around that time named Jesus possibly existed and walked the earth.
Okay, wait. Let's just kind of take this one step at a time here.
Sure.
Honest, Adrian, to not concede that a man named Jesus lived at that time really places you in a very, very fringy, low realm of intellectual honesty.
No, I think you misheard. Did you? I said that I can accept that he exists.
Yeah, I think you would. Let me just suggest to you, Adrian. I think you would do well to simply state, okay, so a guy named Jesus existed. I believe that.
Sure.
It's just his deeds that you have a problem with.
No, well, it's the magic tricks and the resurrecting from the dead. And you say that the evidence for him resurrecting from the dead, there's like mountains of evidence, but where is that evidence?
First of all, it is in what we have in writing, and second of all, what we don't have in writing. We have eyewitness accounts of Jesus' resurrection. It was.
But is that written down by people? Because right now, eyewitness accounts.
Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
But do you think that they wrote the Gospels?
Sure.
But why don't most even like biblical historians why don't they say that they were written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, that they were in fact written later?
But they were written by those guys later. And historically, that's not weird or strange to be a couple of decades behind. That's nothing. But the guys who wrote the Bible saw the risen Jesus. They saw him. Adrian, okay, you're in Honolulu.
And you believe that?
Of course. Adrian, you're in Honolulu. If something like this happened on your island, I'm telling you, are you talking a lot about the Haiti earthquake, and are you talking about the Super Bowl a lot? Of course. It's like the big deal. This was the big deal. This Jesus of Nazareth, this was like all the rage there. And it was causing nothing but grief for the Jewish community. And a bunch of other Jews who really laid it on the line to say, no, he rose from the dead. Adrian, I promise you that if Jesus had not risen from the dead, we would have books talking about how he did not do it. They would have pictures of the bones to this day. This is your Jesus of Nazareth. We don't have the bones. We don't have the body. We have nobody saying that he didn't rise from the dead. In fact, what we have is the contrary. People saying, well, yes, his body was missing, but they stole it. Well, then they should have produced the body. They couldn't do it. Instead, you've got Jewish people who are willing to reject their faith, which is radical, dude. It's like a fanatical Muslim turning his back on Muhammad and the Quran and Allah because he believed in something. That was separating yourself from community, putting you under the sentence of death with the Roman Empire. There's no evidence to contradict what we have in Scripture with eyewitness accounts of a risen God.
Okay, well, first off, missing corpse is by no means the equivalent, does not automatically mean that this corpse ascended into heaven to be our Savior.
No,
that's a
right.
huge leap.
Well,
and so a missing corpse, like corpse go missing all the time, and that's fine. And even if nobody could produce the corpse, that's fine. It's completely possible that whoever, as you say, the Jews or the Romans were trying to find this corpse to prove that he didn't resurrect. The fact that they didn't find it, that's fine. But what are the extra biblical sources?
There are. You've got yourself Josephus, who wrote about it.
But Josephus is very controversial because a lot of people,
they didn't like what he wrote because he was a Jew, but they just didn't like some of his sympathies. So what?
Yeah, but so give me more. Like, who else?
Okay, you've got there's two more that are Latin that have got Latin. One begins with a T, and it is Tacitus.
Is there any I'm sorry. Is there any official Roman documents and stuff like that?
We've got a couple of those where there's talking about a Jesus of Nazareth, Pliny the Younger, Tacitus, Josephus. But even better than those, Adrian, are the people who wrote the Bible. And you're going to say, but they had an agenda. So what? Just because they didn't have an agenda doesn't mean it's not true. And furthermore, because they did have an agenda, they had a higher bar, a higher standard that they had to attain for it to be credible with people. Are these books written with bias? Of course. From researchers, eyewitness accounts, you have what happened in Jerusalem at that time. But Adrian, dude, this is really not the issue of why you don't believe in Jesus of Nazareth. You have more.
But it is the issue. I understand your argument that I just automatically know that God exists, but I'm sorry, those are completely unwarranted assertions. You can't just say that. You could say it, but it makes no sense.
Okay.
Like, I know you disagree, but I used to be a Christian, Todd. I was a Christian very much as you were a Christian, Todd, and I know how you disagree with that.
That's right.
And it's so condescending the way you say that, and it's pretty insulting because people really did just used to believe in Jesus the way that you do now.
No, they didn't.
I won't argue with you there. I know that you say that all the time. I completely disagree.
Adrian, I want to be a gentleman with you, so I'm not going to ask you to answer this question, okay? And I'm going to move along right after it because I don't want it to be awkward for you. Adrian,
I'll answer whatever you want, Todd. I'm open.
I don't want to be a jerk. Adrian, my guess about you is this has to do with sin in your life.
Wrong. I'll answer.
So there's nothing, answering honestly before God himself, there is nothing in your life that you really love doing that you have a sense is a bad thing. There's nothing going on.
No. Well, yeah, sure, I do bad things, but I would really ask you to go back. Forget from the heart. You say that you got to go around the intellect and go to the heart. No, to me, it really does come down to truth.
Okay,
and
Adrian,
it comes down, and I appreciate when you say that something is either true or it isn't.
Okay, Adrian, how much proof would you need for the authenticity and the accuracy of the Scriptures? How much would you need?
I would need corroborated documents that corroborate the claims made by the Bible. And then you also need corroboration and evidence for all of the claims made by the Bible, from Adam and Eve to the flood to the Tower of Babel to everything.
Yeah,
you know?
can't do that.
Because then you don't know which parts of the Bible actually are true.
How's about just the resurrection? How's about the big miracle, the resurrection?
Yeah, that's huge, because if I were to see Todd...
Hold on 1 second. He and I will chat, and then we'll get back to Free for All Friday. My apologies for holding. Thank you for that. Adrian, I'm suggesting your issue is not going to be proved because we've got oodles of it. I just shared some. We've got mountains of it, but that's not the issue. The issue almost always is pride, self-righteousness, and sin. We'll chat with Adrian and you next on Wretched Radio.